Welcome to the shortest month in the year. You know it. It's February. It's the first dialogue of February, and it's Black History Month. And so the dialogue would not be the dialogue if we did not celebrate fully our history. Somebody said American history is Black history. However you want to call it, we're celebrating it. They've given us the last month, but it's incumbent upon us to teach our children our history 24/7, 365. The dialogue is live right now. Hey, right now I'm in the driver's seat. My co-pilot will be KD will be joining us shortly. Very eminently joining us is my dear cousin who joins us quite frequently. Janis Hazel. She'll be on in just a second. But we're glad that you are here. Amen. We're glad that you are here to make the dialogue that's exactly what it is. It's a dialogue. So you put your information in the text thread, and we'll respond to it. Kim is a stickler for responding to text, so we'll certainly get in touch with you and hear what you got to say and react to it. Let me just give you a brief overview of what this is going to look like this month. Tonight's show is actually going to be an overview. It's called what is the state of Blacks in America? Not what's the state of Black America, but what is the state of Blacks in America? How are we faring? How are things working out for us? How does it look for us? So that's what we're doing. And tonight we're going to talk about all of the subjects that we're going to be breaking down during the next 3 weeks and talking about individually. On 1 week, we're going to have Bishop C.E. Glover who has put together a dynamic ministry. I really wanted to kick this Black History thing off with him tonight. He has a ministry that reaches out to the total person. And what I want to ask is, and we definitely need you to have your friends on. I want to ask the question: what is the future of the mission of the Black Church in a post-pandemic world? What is it? Are we still going into the buildings? Is God compelling us to come out of the building and be like our church, or without walls congregation that's reaching out to the street corners and people on the streets, the last, least, and the left out? Or are we going to be about business as usual? If you come in, you can catch it. If not, hope you get it by osmosis. We're going to see how intentional. He has some definite things on that. We're going to do a night that we're going to look at education and economics. I saw a thing on this past weekend that several Fortune 500 companies have come together and invested $90 million a year to extending scholarship to some of our HBCU students that will put them ahead in the investment game. And we want to look at that, and we're gonna have some great guests to deal with that. Bill McCormick, you heard him last year. He was just so inspiring. We're going to have great guests, and we're going to look at the education, because that kind of ties into education and economics. And so we're going to talk about both of those together. And then one night, the most imminent thing that everybody wanted us, so dialogue went on hiatus last week, but everybody wants to talk about Memphis. We are going to talk about that tonight, and we're going to ask: has the relationship gotten better for Blacks in the have relationships improved for Blacks in America with the law enforcement community? We saw the tragedy. It was just totally identified as Black on Black crime, where a young man was beaten together by 5 Black Memphis police officers, and thankfully they have been charged with a second-degree murder. So we're gonna ask that question, and then we're just gonna spend the next 3 weeks delving into specialty items. But tonight we're gonna kind of be all over the place. We just want to ask, where are we? Where are we? What is our state in America? What is our state? Well, how does it looking for us in America? How are we making it? How are we getting along? How are we faring in America? Some people think that the clocks have been turned down. Some people think that 2018, with the election of an African-American president, we are well on our way. Well, it looked like that, I guess, until 2016, and then that's when the hands of the clock started turning back. But so we're going to talk about that. I'm looking right now at MSNBC, and they're showing the pictures of your favorite guy. That guy, what was he, 45, who said there were good people on both sides when these white supremacists, these neo-Nazis were walking down the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, shouting, Jews will not replace us. We never had that kind of openness in the last several years until 2016, and it got energized. And oh boy, we got a special Are You Serious tonight? We got a guy who is trying to out-Trump Trump. We're going to have a good time. So the dialogue is on. We're going to a commercial break, and we'll be right back with you. We're going to hear tonight from GoGetYourCreations.com or GoGetYourCreations.com, and then we'll come back, and then we'll be on our regular format. We'll see you in a second. GoGetGoodWorld.com. They're the ones who make your boy look good. And if they can make him look good, well, guess what, guys? They can make anybody look good. More GoGetGoodWorld.com. They got all of your virtual needs. I don't know, did they have any connection to the Grammys last night? I don't think that the producers of the Grammys could have done any better than they did, even though, man, that host, what's his name, Noah Berry or whatever, he was phenomenal the way he was moving around in his extemporaneous display on last night. He was just fluid, and he was tight the way he worked that thing out with the audience last night, moving from scene to scene. We've kind of gotten away from the stage, a host being right at the stage. Okay, I'm looking quickly for our guest to come on. Well, Jan's not a guest; she's like a co-hostess, but we're looking to get started here into tonight's dialogue to see just where we are. How are we faring? What is the state of us what is the state of Blacks here in America? Jan, how are you doing?
Oh, okay. So you can see me now. I'm fantastic. How are you?
We are great, thank you. Yes, you are fantastic. You kind of pitched in at the 11th hour, and boy, you didn't take a back seat appearance-wise at all. Thank you so much for hopping on, sis. Appreciate it.
I had to quickly get myself together, but this is great because I was just setting up a new computer, and now I can test to see if everything is working, and my microphone is working. It wasn't working earlier. I've been troubleshooting for about 3 hours, so I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you for your willingness at the 11th hour. We really appreciate it. KV will be on at some point. He kind of under anticipated this South Florida traffic, and it beat him up. So as soon as he gets set and gets in a makeshift studio, he'll be joining us. Let me give a little perspective on Jan. Jan yields. I know she never fails to let people know it. She yields from the D, Detroit, Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. There she go. She's as proud of that as I am of being from the dirty. And well, actually, I'm from Duval, but I proudly exist here down in the dirty. Been here almost 25 years now. Place that ironically I kind of resisted, and it's turned out to be a paradise that you couldn't drag me out of here. But Janis, for you all who don't really know, and you haven't been looking at all of the Black history stuff, feed yourself this month. Go to YouTube, go to the History Channel, pull up some of these videos. If you have access to Eyes on the Prize, particularly the second version to our younger crowd, and just catch up on where we have come from. Listen, guys, you haven't always been able to go to the beach and stay as long as you want and eat wherever you want. It hadn't always existed like that. I remember when I was working in Daytona, that was a barrier that was just being overcome in the world's most famous beach. So it's not that we're that old either now. We won't take that. But it just says you have just arrived on a scene where some strides have been made because people like Rosa Parks, and Jen, I want to ask you about her, were made and by people like her and open doors for people like us. So Janis is from Detroit. For you don't who don't know it, Detroit is a very pro-black community. In fact, it was one of the original chocolate cities, along with Washington, and it's Mayor Coleman Young was a legendary black mayor in that city. Jan, just give us a short history on Detroit, and it's also I won't say it's the birth home, but it's a strong contingent of the Black Panther Party came from the Detroit area. And Jen, just give us a brief, history on Detroit's activism and I don't want to use the term militarism, but their activism and their advocacy for the rights of blacks.
Right. So the city of Detroit, Michigan, is the largest Black American populated city in the United States with a population over 500,000. So we are the largest. It's not in the South, it's not Atlanta, it's not other cities that you might think of. It's the city of Detroit. Our population is 80% Black and 20% other. So that is the largest Black population of Black folks in the United States. And with that comes a lot of freedoms that perhaps we were not have had if we were in other cities. But racism in the city of Detroit is not masked. It is here, and it has always been here. As a northern city, segregation, Jim Crow, all of those things were present, but not as bad as they were in our southern cities and throughout the United States. So my parents moved here in the 1950s. Many of their siblings and aunts and uncles moved here in the 1940s. And so we have a very strong hold here in the city of Detroit, very proud of it. And what I would say, Dozell, I'm very glad that you mentioned Watch Eyes on the Prize. I actually participated in the funding of acquiring the funding and producing of Eyes on the Prize over 30 years ago when I worked for public television stations. I actually represented all 350 public television stations throughout the United States in acquiring their annual appropriation. That's funding from your tax dollars to all of the stations. So there in Florida, you have public television stations, and I would encourage you to check out a lot of the programming that is on your PBS stations right now. A wonderful program, which is part of the American Experience programming, is The Blinding of Isaac Woodard. The Blinding of Isaac Woodard. If you are unfamiliar with that, it's an incredible case that happened in 1946, where there was a Black man who had just come back from serving in World War II to South Carolina. And unfortunately, because of the racism in the South, police officers blinded him, gouged his eyes out. And that started a lawsuit with the former attorney turned U.S. Justice of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, who was the head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund at that time. And this caught the eye of federal judge that heard the case. A lot of cases back then, because Black people were not allowed to vote, there was all kinds of voter suppression. There were no Blacks on juries, because how do you get your jury pool? You get your jury pool from registered voters, right? And so that's why you had all these all-white juries at that point in time. And even now, you oftentimes have them because, unfortunately, a lot of Black and Hispanic members of our communities don't register to vote. Therefore, they're not on jury pools. This particular jury was not going to convict this white police officer that gouged the eyes out of a decorated sergeant in the Army who had just come back from World War II because he wanted to use the restroom. He wanted to stop. He was on a bus going back home after he got back from the military. And he was pulled off of a bus. I don't know if it was a Greyhound, but it was a bus. And the officers beat him horribly because here's a man who served in the US military, who was a decorated war veteran. He had on his military uniform with all of the bars and stripes and honors on his military uniform. And he was beaten just because he was Black, and he asserted himself as a man. You know, those men who served in the military, Dozell, you know, your father served in the military, in the Marines, was one of the first Black Marines to integrate that branch of the military. That endowed Black American men with certain rights that they thought, okay, now we have defended the United States overseas. We have, now we're coming back home, but it was a different, Jim Crow was still alive and well. And so when they asserted their humanness and their manhood, white folks weren't going for it. So they beat this man mercilessly, gouged his eyes out, and he was blinded. This caught the ire of President Truman because he, while he was somewhat immune to the racism that was going on, when he found that this was a military veteran, decorated sergeant who had been beaten like that and his eyes gouged out, he was now blind, he did something. So I encourage everyone to watch the PBS American Experience program titled The Blinding of Isaac Woodard, Woodard. And there's a plethora of programming right now on rotation, at least on Detroit Public Television, I'm sure on your public TV stations also. Roberta Flack documentary, fantastic documentary on Roberta Flack. I hope that you get to see it. Right now, they're also showing a documentary on the Freedom Riders. Freedom Riders. My mother was a Freedom Rider. She's from Alabama. And they talk about how the Freedom Riders were trained in nonviolent protest and how that all played out throughout the 60s. And Dozell, you asked me about the Panthers. I don't know or haven't had really that much interaction with the Black Panthers. What had a stronghold in the city of Detroit was Mosque Number 1 for the Nation of Islam. And this is where Brother Malcolm X began his ministry in Detroit. Mosque Number 1 for the Nation of Islam is here in Detroit, still here. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad began that ministry for the nation here. And Malcolm X, as some of you may know, while he was born in Oklahoma, due to the racism that was going on. Thank you, Toya. There it is right there, the blinding of Isaac Woodard. And then, of course, the murder of Emmett Till. The Freedom Riders that I mentioned is up on your screen now. Fantastic programming on Black history during the month of February, but this is throughout the year. Public television, PBS stations provide a wonderful history of Black people's contributions as well as our problems. The Zora Neale Hurston is at the top left of the screen. Fantastic documentary that I hope you will get to watch. Talks about Zora Neale Hurston, not just her books, but did you know Zora Neale Hurston was an anthropologist? She was an anthropologist, and she was studying Black people throughout the United States. And so it's wonderful programming. But going back to the blinding of Sergeant Woodard, this moved a known segregationist, which was President Truman, to act. And it also moved a white Southern federal judge to act because he couldn't believe that the white members of that community in South Carolina were going to bring back a jury verdict in 5 minutes. That judge actually left the court so that they would not come back. He would not reconvene the courtroom, and that set off a whole awakening. We talk about wokeism. Well, yes, these heinous acts that have happened to Black people actually woke up President Truman, actually woke up a federal judge on how Black people were being treated due to Jim Crow laws and segregation. So just check your PBS station, and you will definitely get some wonderful programming. Toya's putting them up, our wonderful producers putting up there. Marian Anderson, wonderful documentary on her. Fannie Lou Hamer. You
Yeah.
must see the documentary
Unsung.
on Fannie Lou Hamer, which is there in the fourth column on your screen. Dozell, you mentioned also Rosa Parks. I had a relationship with Mrs. Rosa Parks. Many of you may or may not know that Congressman John Conyers, who I worked for, who was an original founder of the Congressional Black Caucus when there were only a handful of Black members of Congress. He went into U.S. Congress in 1965. He was an architect of the Voting Rights Act that passed in
Oh, wow.
1965.
Wow.
Congressman Conyers also wrote legislation a few days after Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and he created the legislation that created the Martin Luther King Holiday Bill. I actually had a chance to work on that legislation in the 1980s and actually was there the summer of 1983 when the Martin Luther King Holiday Bill was passed out of committee and then signed off on, passed out of the House of Representatives, out of the U.S. Senate, and was signed by President Ronald Reagan. And it became effective in 1986. I'll go back.
That's so ironic. I didn't mean to, so ironic. Madam Producer, I don't know if you got your headsets on, but I was talking to your sister the other night. Do you remember the first King holiday? I had you and your sister's two little girls. I thought that was going to be my family. All we would have, you guys, I had you all sit through and watch TV for countless hours that Monday night as we watched the all of the festivities for the initial King celebration. What was that, Jan? Like 86, 85?
Well, the Martin Luther King holiday became effective and was first acknowledged or celebrated in 1986, January of 1986.
January, okay.
But it took 15 years for that legislation to get passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate and to get to a president. So it started out in 1968, right after Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And for 15 years, every year, Congressman Conyers reintroduced the legislation until we was able to get it passed. And so that got passed in 1983. And then it took, a cycle for it to become law. But it was signed by Ronald Reagan in 1983, and it became law.
So, Jan, you were on the Capitol during that season.
Yes.
How hard was it to convince Reagan, who actually was Trump before Trump, who fed red meat to the racist bait in the South, attending all of I don't want to categorize people, but all of the hot racing circuit, and where the Confederate flags were blazingly displayed and everything, and that's actually, people don't notice, that's where the term "Make America Great," he purported that before Trump ever did. How hard was it, or how ironic was it to have him, of all presidents? He was the most far right president of probably both of our lifetimes, and that translates into unequal rights. The right wing agenda often translates into unequal rights for blacks and minorities, and of course, with the crazies that are in office now, it just translates into just blatant racism. But how ironic, or how difficult was it to convince the old man to beat up the man who signed that bill?
Well, there were coalitions that were created, and at a certain point, the Republicans of the past really took their job seriously. They were not obstructionists like we see now. And then you had people like the Speaker of the House at that point in time was Thomas O'Neill, who served as the Speaker of the House then. And he was in the House of Representatives from Massachusetts from 1977 to 1987. And they worked, there was contention, but they were a different brand of people who actually had some moral backbone. And you could talk to those people. I served on legislative staffs for members of Congress, including Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. And I also served as a lobbyist for industry. And you could actually talk to these people. They, may not agree with you, but you could talk with them. And I'm talking about Republicans, and you could negotiate with them to get something. So go back and look through your pictures of that time frame and the signing of the Martin Luther King holiday bill, and you will see Mrs. Coretta Scott King. You will see a number of people, Jesse Jackson, just a number of people who were there surrounding President Reagan. I look back even before Reagan. I was a child when President Nixon was the president. And this might sound odd for someone who's been a Democrat all of her voting life, but I have respect for President Nixon, because President Nixon, he actually enacted some things, and he appointed some Black people that have made a difference. The Small Business Administration and then the Minority Small Business Administration came out under President Nixon. People have to read their history. And then when you get to Reaganomics, you get to President Ford after that. These were men who actually had some respectability and conscience, unlike what we're seeing now, where these people have sold their souls. Many of these Republicans have just sold their souls and are following behind someone who is absolutely wrong person to be leading this country. So, we can dialogue. Perhaps that's a show at another time to talk about presidents in our lifetime, because it is my view currently. And when you look back to, let's say, President Johnson, you really got to look at the white liberals in Congress who have held Black Americans and Blacks back in progress. Just look at it. You will see that oftentimes Republicans have been the ones who actually enacted legislation, signed off on legislation, or as president signed bills for Black people. What we have now is a president who is a Democrat, but I question his loyalty to the Black voter base. I'm really quite offended by this president and vice president in a number of things that they've done and haven't done for the Black community. Not to say that Republicans would have done any better, but I'd rather know the evil and the enemy. I'd rather have them tell me to my face than to say they're going to do something and not. So I encourage, when you talk about the state of Black America, I think if you're talking about politics, Black voters need to have a report card. Just like you have a report card that your children bring home, and you check it and you look at all of the classes or the grade levels and their past. You need to have a report card on what is important to you personally and to your community. Are there federal dollars? Are there local, state, city, township dollars going towards the things that are important to you? Education, public works, whatever that might be. And then you got to look at the voting records of these people that you have elected or who represent you. You might not have voted for them, but they represent you, and hold them accountable for what they're doing or what they're not doing. And so, Dozell, my issue for the last 34 years has been reparations for African Americans, descendants of enslaved people. And before the night's over, hopefully Toya can pull up another wonderful, absolutely wonderful PBS special on Harriet Tubman. Amazing. I watched it over the weekend. I think it was produced in 2020. And so it came out this year.
That was an amazing.
Did you see it?
Amazing.
Absolutely amazing. There's Tip O'Neill, Speaker Tip O'Neill, and Ronald Reagan. And these men actually had respect for each other.
And you know what else, Jan? They not only had respect for each other, but they had respect for the rule of law, and they had respect for political systems.
That's right. Absolutely.
One of the things
they did.
And
they could work together. There was
they could work together. They did work together. And one of the things that and we're going to talk more about that when we do the segment on the Black church, was that for Black Americans, we put our trust in government because we thought that was our way for we children of the 50s and 60s. We thought that that was our way to overcome segregation, to overcome economic violence, and to get our piece of the pie, our piece of the American dream. And that was always that always did work for us. Maybe the progress was not at the pace that we would have rather it be, but at least there was progress. And it were men of principle like Reagan and Tip O'Neill. But man, it's absolute crazy land. Now we got to take a heartbreak, and we come back. We got a real special one for you tonight. Somebody with theme music or background commercial music that tight, they gotta be awesome producers of all of your virtual needs. Everything from web building to making you look good. Like, well, Janis doesn't have a problem, but they have to work hard to make me look good on the dialogue on Monday night. And I think they do a darn good job of doing that. They'll do all of your virtual needs. That's GoGigaWorld.com, Latoya G, Latoya W, Makia, that whole crew, they will make you look good and handle all of your virtual needs. Well, guess what, y'all? Guess who messed around and caught himself in the midst, square with a bullseye on his back in the dialogue? If it ain't your boy, Ron. If I knew my mother wasn't watching, I might have another way of describing him. It might be something to the order of Ron. Y'all figure that piece out, okay? Ron DeSantis. Are you serious? You've taken what actually was one of the more desired states in all of America, whether income, no income tax, employment, race relations in several parts, beaches, sunny beaches, sunshine, and you have made us the embarrassing armpit of not only America, but the free world. That's what you've done, Ron DeSantis. You put us squarely in the embarrassment. From the time that you came onto the scene, kissing up to 45 with your little son, parading around with the Trump dog and imitating him, to being the true snake that you are, turning your back on your very mentor and seeking the job that you know he wants to get back into. Ron DeSantis, are you serious? You barely won. You won by a razor-thin election, and in 2018, just getting past Ron Gillum, and you won by 30,000 votes. You should have been, just like he should have been in 2016, the one who could work both sides of the aisle. You should have been the one who represented all of our needs, particularly people of African American descent. But you would rather reach out to the racist base that you saw your mentor reach out to, just to create this base, this political base. Ron DeSantis, are you serious? You've taken Florida and you made it an absolute clown show. If I use the language, I use a stronger adjective. You have really embarrassed everybody who has a green and orange tag on the back of their cars. And those of us Floridians from the days gone on, you have totally embarrassed us. You embarrassed us. You've been on the fringe of breaking the laws. You thought that you were hurting somebody when you took citizens and bust them over into Martha's Vineyard. Not citizens. You took people who had come into this country and you dropped them off in Martha's Vineyard. You thought they'd be mistreated, but you saw real people. You didn't see this racist base that you feed your red meat to. You saw people who were people of good character, good quality, good content, and good-hearted people, and they reached out and grabbed the very people that you dumped on an airplane and dropped off in the middle of nowhere, thinking that they would starve and be homeless the very night they got off the airplane. Ron DeSantis, are you serious? You have set Florida back in its image 50 years, just 50 years. Claude Kirk, you all remember him? He was a Republican governor who kind of had a mind of his own. However, Claude Kirk never resorted to the idiocracy that you have. And what makes that such an absolute shame is, Ron DeSantis, you have 2 degrees from Yale University, an Ivy League trained. You're not this buffoon that you portray. You're not this Rambo figure that you try to be. You are just a meek lawyer who happened to just barely escape into the governor's office. Really, you should have been defeated if Gillum would have been around last year. But you barely skated into office, and then when you got there, you turned into an absolute idiot. Ron DeSantis, are you serious? I guess I got to end this segment, but let me just say this. Ron, you want to be president. Ain't happening, buddy. Your act works well with the racist base here in Florida, but it won't work like that nationwide. You just heard my cousin talk about liberal or moderate Republicans who look at your level of buffoonery and will thumb their nose at you and not accept you, Ron. And you really want to know what's really bad? Are you serious? Do you really want to know what's bad? The fact that you have created policies where you have delineated Black folk, you've taken education, you have just totally misused and abused us. You have totally made us second-class citizens. You know what the real problem with that is? You're a boat person yourself, DeSantis. Ron DeSantis. Ron. Are you serious? That's all I can do. Take his picture down. Can't look at him anymore. So, Jan, I kind of want to go in a different direction. Kim has just informed us that he'll be back. He'll be here with us in just a second. I want to go in a different direction. I was trying to incite some conversation when I was talking about the Panther. My dad never would have, of course, never let me be one, and I was just a little boy when they were in their heyday. But as I became older, I have immense respect for them, and I know we have a cousin who flirted. If he wasn't a member, he flirted with them, and it wasn't because of the militant stuff that they did. It was because of they set up the first Head Start programs, and they fed people. They were the first soup kitchens in America. They did it without the help of the government. And I'm just, they may have gotten grants along the way, but they were the ones who did it, and they lined up and made us look good. But I want to talk about advocacy, being an advocacy today. Who are our leaders? Is Reverend Al Sharpton, because he does all of the funerals of people who were killed by police? Is he our national leader by default? Reverend Jackson, my hero, is he's aged and he's sick. He's becoming weaker with his illness. But who are our leaders today?
Well, I think that there's a leader inside every person. And I don't think that we need to line up specifically just behind one or two people, because as you see, and as you said, Reverend Jesse Jackson is aging, as we all will by the grace of God, and is afflicted with Parkinson's. And so that affects his ability to walk and talk sometimes. And then Reverend Al Sharpton, he's still out there doing his thing for social justice. But I think that we should be empowering everybody to be an advocate for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for the causes that are important to them. And how do you do that? I have taught you know, political science at a couple of institutions you might be aware of. My alma mater, University of Michigan, Howard University, and George Washington University in Virginia. And I have taught major corporate leaders how to advocate, how to come to Capitol Hill and lobby for what they wanted for public television, for commercial building industry, which I was a lobbyist for those two industries. And it's all about what you want and going to the power structure. So if you're talking about on the federal level, those are your members of Congress in the US Senate and in the House of Representatives. On the local level, you've got your mayor, your city councils, or your aldermen and women, your townships, whatever the configuration is of your jurisdiction. If you want something, you need to ask for it. And quite frankly, as a taxpayer, you need to demand it, and unapologetically demand it, demand what it is that you want. So with regards to this curriculum, the College Board AP classes for African Americans that your governor in Florida has rejected, I would ask all, thank you, Toya, that's the one exactly I wanted to put up, concerns found within the AP African American Studies course. I would encourage parents and other concerned members of your community to look at this, because I have some concerns about what I see here. I would say take the emotion out of what is being widely put out there about this. I am not at all in the corner for Ron DeSantis, but on some levels, based on what I see here, I have some concerns. There are a number of wonderful literary writers as well at present day and past that I think could have been included. What advocacy is, it's about negotiation, the art of the deal. Your former president talked about that, wrote a book on it. I am a negotiator, and I think that anyone can be talked to and informed. So much of the racism that goes on in the United States is because people are uninformed, and they have bought into the sound bites and age-old antiquated ideas about Black people and uneducated savages, when the most savage people in this country have been white Americans. You know, they stole this country from the Native Americans or indigenous people by force because they had weapons, they had guns. The Native Americans didn't.
No, no, I tell you what they had. They had a false theology, which said they had if I could just think of the name of it, they had a theology that said manifest destiny. That's what they call it.
But they had guns. They had guns. Let's not forget.
But
they
I'm
had
saying
guns.
But I'm obviously guns they take it by force. But it's the ideology that's perpetrated. Like right now, I'm not easy on DeSantis because unlike Trump, DeSantis, obviously you got 2 Yale degrees. You're not a ignorant person at all. DeSantis is just playing this role, and for him to, let me just tell you what's going on now in Florida. And this was happening as we were signing on. They show Duval County, and there's another county where the teachers have either put yellow like crime tape around the books to tell their kids don't go to the books, or they have blocked off their shelves, or they're taking all books off the shelves because they're saying we're not going to get arrested. Did you hear me? We're not going to be arrested for teaching something that is not real, that's not allowed by this governor. He has turned the clocks back more than George Wallace could have ever done it.
But
George
who has
Wallace,
the power there? Who has the power there? It's not just Ron DeSantis, it's the voters.
It's the
parents
numbers. It's the numbers
that need to rise up and turn that around.
Well, I mean, what's crazy about it is that by 30,000 votes, he was elected in 2018 by 30,000 votes. He ironically beat the African-American former mayor of Tallahassee, Florida. He had a fall that made him ineligible, made him politically ineligible to run, because with 30,000 votes, you had that many returning citizens that would have turned the tables and gotten him in office. But we just don't have the numbers. What we have seen when oh gosh, what was her name? Val Demings was beating Marco Rubio in all of the early polls. She was slaughtering him, and the Republicans came down here and poured in money and energized that base, that red base. So all of these back counties, they all turned out, and by numbers, they came out. We don't have the numbers. It takes an extraordinary effort to win at the ballot box on a statewide election.
And it does, but let us not be defeated.
No, I mean,
I never deal in that.
It's a reality that we have to face.
It is a reality, but we've come this far by faith and by turning the tables of being active. So if some of your viewers, listeners, watch some of these PBS specials and look at like the Freedom Riders, for those who are not really aware, particularly younger people who are not really aware of the civil rights movement, but the movements before that, the early 1900s, the 1930s and 40s, we got the courage against the guns, against the brutality, against jobs being taken away from us when we spoke up, against being lynched. We Black people in so many states around the country rose up and voted, demanded our ability to vote, even with all the voter suppression going on, and we turned things around. And we've got to get back to that. Folks have to realize the power is at the ballot. Malcolm X talked about in a wonderful speech, hopefully you'll bring that up and read it, is the ballot or the bullet. Yeah. And you've got to look at the bullet has held us back. It held our Native American brothers and sisters back because they did not have that type of weaponry at that time. They were more hand-to-hand combat. That is how Black people, Africans, were stolen from our native land in Africa because they had bullets, and we didn't have that at that point in time. But the ballot box is incredible. Why do you think white Americans, those who want to suppress the vote, they don't want us? Because it's critical. It is our voice. It is the voice of everyone. So I would hope that your viewers, listeners, friends really take that into consideration. You can turn things around by your sheer voices. The parents in Florida, as well as around the country where these books are being banned or what have you, really have to come out. I'll talk about a community here in Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the largest population of Muslim Americans, of Middle Eastern Americans in the country. It's just 2 blocks from my house. Okay. This is a community that when I was growing up, the mayor said no ends would ever live in that city. And now it's a hugely populated by Middle Eastern Americans, Muslim Americans.
Right.
They're protesting against some of the books that are in some of their public schools, and they are turning that around. Their school board, effectively, they're taking over their school board, where they were agreeing to some of these books. And I'm not saying that what the parents are doing is right or wrong, but they're speaking up. They're taking over their school board meetings and saying, we don't want our children to read this. We do want our children to read that. And you as a school board are not omni-powerful. We, the parents, have the power. And that's what parents everywhere need to do. Go to those school board meetings, have recalls for those who were elected. Like, you're out of there.
Jan, I don't know if it's my age. I got a few journeys around the sun over you, just a few. But when I was old enough to study the civil rights movement, it was told that in our community it was gradualism. There was a couple of famous Black churchmen that believed in that, and then there was the Kings, and there were the Malcolm X, and said we want justice now. And we want it now, and I'm not at all saying that that's what you're espousing, but what I'm saying is we don't have the numbers to at the box right now. Now I'm a voter registrar. I register voters. That's what I do. So I obviously believe in the power of voting and the power of the ballot box. But and I will always push that. But in Florida, where we make up, I think 31%, and when they coalesce and come together to keep us out, like what happened to Val Demings, I think we have to find alternative methods. I hear you saying protesting the school boards, and we're actually being taught to really push the local, the down, what we would call the down ballot, because this is the off year, push the down ballot. I know all of the demographics of all of that. But I'm saying along the way, it's going to take some more, it's going to take some other tactics. And you know what? Forgive me. I tried to be gentle by pushing the Panthers. But it wasn't until the Panthers started burning streets that America started listening. It wasn't until the burning took place in, where's that place outside of St. Louis where Michael Brown was killed?
Yes, I can't think of the name of the city, but yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, we always start in our own community as opposed to going across the street. But when you do stuff like that, you get attention. Now, for the sake of this one platform and everybody else, I'm not espousing violence or any of that thing. But one thing I had to come to the grips, and I'm a church person, I'm a preacher, but I came into the reality that it was the activism of Dr. King's nonviolence. It was the self-reliance of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, but it was also the threat that the Black Panther Party posed to America that helped it to hasten its break on segregation. KB, you with us? Without
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I know you just joined in. We in. I want you on camera so I can embarrass you, but I know you won't come on. I know why you won't.
Yeah, I'm eating, so I'm sitting here eating.
That's why I went.
That's what I'm trying to. That's why I cut the camera off. But I got to chime in on what you just said about the protests and all. Protests. A lot of people don't understand this, but protests aren't meant to be. Well, let me say it like this: protests are meant to make people uncomfortable. So, sometimes you have to go to extreme measures to get people to listen to you. And that's what a protest, sometimes you can try and do it as peaceful as you want, but if people aren't paying attention, sometimes you have to go to different extremes to get them to pay attention to your protest. So, I heard you just speaking about the Panthers. I was in the backstage, and I heard you speak about the Panthers and all, but they had to go to some extreme levels to get people to pay attention to them. I mean, Janis, you know that more than anybody being right there in Detroit, But
I would say
excuse me for not speaking. How you doing? Cuz I should have spoke first. I'm sorry.
I will say this. I am ready to go full metal jacket with rounds of ammunition draped around my body. Black is my principal color. And I think that on some levels we do need to do that.
You ain't gonna do it naked, are you?
Do it where?
I thought that little inside.
Did you hear what I said?
I didn't hear that last thing. What did you say?
See, you hear me.
You said you won't do that.
I said you're not gonna do it. You're not gonna do it naked, are you?
I'll have on my black turtleneck, my black leather jacket, and full rounds of ammunition, and carrying my long gun, because we are an open carry state here in Michigan. I think the provocative is always necessary. Mrs. Coretta Scott King, when she talked to her husband before he was killed, he said, Martin, you need to talk with Malcolm, because really it's that play against each other. Nonviolence, so you can work with us, meaning the power structure, or we can unleash our brothers and you'll have to deal with them. I think the provocative is actually very necessary. And I'm definitely not preaching violence, but violence is always being visited upon Black bodies. We've got the lynching by police departments of Black men around this country. It has never stopped. And so at what point, here in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, we had a white officer execute a man, a Black man, actually had him handcuffed on the ground. This was last year. Handcuffed on the ground, and put the gun up to the back of his head and shot him, all on videotape. He knew that his camera, his what do you call it? The camera that the officer, body cam was
Body
on.
cam.
They don't care. And because, and you know this more intimately than I do, because of the immunity and the lack of accountability that goes on, his attorney just came out and said this case should be dismissed because there was no crime committed. Again, it's telling you that there are pockets of this country, a mindset that killing a Black person, a Black man, is not a crime. We are seeing it on videotape. We saw this over 30 years ago with Rodney King on videotape. We're seeing it every day. I just saw yesterday, and it blew my mind, a man in California, I believe it was, who has no legs. He was in a wheelchair. He's a double amputee, and the police shot and killed him. They said they were fearful because he had a butcher knife, but the man had no legs. He didn't throw it. You all could have stood down a little while longer. So it's open season on Black people in this country, still is. So the provocative, I think we need to look at other measures, because this Congress and these local governments and these police departments, they're not hearing us. They're not hearing us. Anytime the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States, and the minority leaders of our U.S. Congress get up and say, we're going to try and do something, that's a signal they're not doing anything. That was 2 years ago that we've been trying to, almost 3 years ago now, that we've been trying to get the George Floyd police reform legislation passed.
Let me ask you all, speaking of that, let me ask you this question. Both of you all, let me ask you, I am so undone with police killing our people. I'm just beyond. I can't even do it no more. I refuse to look at the video when they were hyping it like it was a movie debuting on Friday night at 7:00 Central Time. I couldn't look at it because I can take only so much, and I'm to my limit.
Are you referring to the Memphis case?
Right.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, and Kim, start with you. I want to ask, was there a rapid arrest and a rapid firing and arrest of those officers, which we have never seen in any of this? We've been crying for this. These people, they maintain their jobs for weeks. They get paychecks for weeks after they kill our boys in the streets. And then if they are finally arrested, it's with a small charge. In this case, these guys were arrested immediately. They were fired immediately, and they were charged with second-degree murder. Now, was that because they were Black, Kim?
I'm one of these people, and I'm realistic with things. I'm very realistic when I look at situations, and I hate to look at black and white like that. To answer your question, I can't say it was because it was Black, because you got to look at the big picture. These guys, they didn't, that wasn't a traffic stop. They targeted that guy. They was looking for that specific person to stop him. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but he was alleged to have been dating one of the officers' wives. One of the officers stepped to him and said, "Hey man, leave my ex-wife alone, my baby mama alone." Dude told him, "Man, bump you," and he continued to see her. When they stopped him, they targeted him. They were stopping him, and you notice on the first stop, they weren't really trying to cuff him, and that's why he jumped up and ran, because he recognized them, and he jumped up and ran. And when they caught him the second time, that was personal. And all my years of police work, and I've been around police work 30-some years total, 26 as an officer, 30-some years total, and about 36 years total. I've never seen police brutality quite like that before. I've never seen it quite like that before. And I'm speaking against my own people. I'm just being real. When they held that young man up and had his hands behind his back, extended behind his back, and that dude hit him so hard, he spent round the other way. He walked back around there and hit him, and he spent back around the other way. And then another guy hit him. One guy kicked him in the face 3 times. I mean, I've never seen, Rodney King was bad. Rodney King was bad, but it wasn't like this, man. This right here was like a gang initiation. It looked like somebody was jumping somebody into a gang. That's what it looked like. Right. And so, I can't say I can't say they did these guys because they were black, but it's what those guys did, man. They did some crazy stuff. And it was so easy to charge them based on what they did. And then if they found out, and then once they found out that it's probably gonna get bumped up to first degree once they're able to prove that allegedly this guy took a picture of the guy beat up and sent it to his ex-wife to show him, you know. So I mean, if all this is true, and I'm not saying that it's true, this is what I've heard from several different sources. I've seen different little clips and articles on it. But if all this is true, this is going to get bumped up to first degree murder, and those guys going to get charged for first degree murder, not second degree. And they're going to have a whole lot of other charges. They got them already charged with kidnapping, aggravated assault. They got them with second degree murder right now. What's the thing? What's the law when you use your uniform and your badge to
yeah.
I can't think of the name of the charge right now, but you know what I'm saying. But they got them charged like 5 charges apiece. Yeah. So if all this stuff is true, I don't think they acted too fast. I don't think they acted too fast at all. That's just my opinion.
So is this something? So because when it happened and before we saw the video, I guess it started leaking out that there were black police officers. But before it really got out, everybody was saying, "Man, this is cool. This is the first time we've ever seen them fire people this rapidly and then charge them, and not just charge them like you say with manslaughter, but with they threw the book at them pretty much." But
they never hit with manslaughter. They hit with second degree. They never got hit with manslaughter.
No. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. They didn't get charged with that. They went almost to the max right off the bat. And so I'm saying. That was a ferocious beating, but we never saw it happen that fast. Look how long Derek Chauvin walked around free. He wasn't arrested or fired. The PBA or FOP or whoever protected him and got him a couple extra paychecks before he was ever fired, and then it was still a long time before he was arrested.
Well, look back 30 years ago to New York City, and the heinous act against Amadou Diallo, a man who was not only beaten, but he was also sodomized by police officers. And it took a long time for the criminal justice system, I guess the DA's office, to even want to deal with it. So I wonder, when we look at this particular case of Tyree Nichols, and right, Mr. Anderson says Eric Garner's killer is free. Absolutely. We have to look at, it was a black police chief. How did that bear into it? It was a woman police chief who took swift action. So, there are other moving parts in this that have not existed in the other departments. Particularly, and these were black men, but I wonder how much a black woman police chief who swiftly fired and got them charged had to do with this, because we've seen possibly even more heinous. As I was mentioning, we were talking about 1946 with the blinding of Isaac Woodard, and that was, all white jury, all white DA. Even the federal prosecutors came in on that one because President Truman said he wanted it prosecuted in the federal domain. Federal prosecutors didn't even call witnesses on who saw the beating and how this man was blinded, eyes gouged out. So it's something that we definitely have to follow. What is the state of Black America? Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you brought a good point when you brought up the black female chief. And one thing a lot of people may know and they may not know, she had the same situation when she was chief in Atlanta. She had the same situation with the specialized unit, and they went overboard. That unit went overboard, and she was fired. So naturally, in her position now, she's going to take swift action to make sure that she's covered, to make sure she's trying to do the right thing, which she did the right thing by doing what she did with these 5 officers. But and I want to say this too. I worked most of my career in specialized units. I don't agree with them disbanding the Scorpion unit. I think they should have just put some better supervisors in place and put the right officers in place. Sometimes you put them immature officers in, the officers who've been on the streets long enough that don't know how to act, and that badge done went to their head. That's what hurt the Scorpion unit. It wasn't the unit. The citizens out there want units that's going to come to that area and clean it up, but clean it up the right way. You know what I'm saying? You got a lot of citizens in certain neighborhoods that can't afford. There's some older people that can't afford to move, and they're trapped in these areas now because these young boys don't went in there and set up traps and all around their houses and all that. Set up the crack houses all around their houses. They can't afford to leave their neighborhood, so they're glad to see a unit like the Scorpion unit come in and clean it up. So disbanding that unit, I thought was they were trying to be too politically correct or whatever the case might have been. All it takes is to put special people on that unit where you don't have to worry about them going out there and have the proper supervision. Our supervisors used to ride with us. That's what we rode as the whole unit rode together. And if we jumped out on, if it was one person, you might see 7 people jump out on them, including our supervisor, because we rode together as a unit. And, we policed it the way it was supposed to be policed. We didn't go out there jumping on people, beating them up and all that. One rule in police work, and this might sound harsh, but one rule in police work is when the cuffs go on, the licks stop. And that's across the nation. I've heard officers all across the nation say that. I'm not saying that it's right for them to beat them until they put cuffs on them, but I'm just saying when the cuffs go on, you stop hitting a person. That's like a unwritten rule. Dozell, you know that from being a police officer.
But that's counter to what we're seeing. It's counter to what we're seeing.
And that's my point. That's my point, Janis, that you got to put the right officers and the right supervisors in place. You won't see that type thing.
I can't agree with you more about, it's probably an unpopular stance in light of what's going on right now, but I 1000% say, don't disband the unit. Now, let me tell you my history of these specialized units. They know a lot of this stuff, not like what happened to Tyree Nichols, but they know a lot of coming to that thin line of bending the law takes place. But they also know that they're not sending them out to choir boards to deal with. They're sending them to the worst, the most horrific crime-ridden areas, the most heinous criminals. And so, like Kim said, these poor citizens who live in these areas who have nowhere to go, they become like something you see on TV that are subjected to these little young black crime lords. So you got to kind of like match fire with fire, but it's unwritten that, man, you're going to do what you got to do. But if you cross the line, you on your own. That's kind of the unwritten thing. So I think they have them like what you were saying, Kim, with some constraints. Yeah, you got to match fire with fire. I'm definitely against breaking up units like that. And it's unfortunate that these clowns cause it to be such. I don't know. How do you weed out people who should not have a bad psychologically before they ever
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the thing that I want to know. I mean, I've experienced very poor policing in Washington, D.C., where it was Black officers who were the ones mistreating me and other members of the community more so than white or Asian or Hispanic officers. The psychological profiles. What type? I mean, it's part of the recruiting, which we're hearing. It's very difficult to get people to go into these police departments. But this recruitment, and then what are the psychological profiles or testing? Because those individuals, those 5 men, were savage brutes, and I can't believe that this is the first time it happened. This seems like this is a part of them bullying. And if it was targeted because of some domestic issue, that's a whole nother issue. But that mentality to do that to a human being, that's a part of them.
Let me say this. I know from my 26 years on the job, first of all, I'm gonna say this. Sometimes it's not a black or white thing; it's a blue thing.
Yes.
Once you've been on the agency long enough, you don't look at black and white. You look at blue, and it's a blue game. So, secondly, I want to say this. Officers come on the job, and they come on for the right reason. That they're doing the right thing, and after they've been on for a while, and they see the way the community, especially these days, not so much my time, but in these days right now, They see the way the police treat them. I mean, the community treats the police. So it becomes a us versus them thing. So I also might come on the job to do to do police work the right way. And after he's been out there for a while and they see the way that the community is being treating them, and then when you arrest them and do everything the right way and they're right back out on the streets, they beat you back out on the streets before you can even write your report. They start forming this certain, I won't say opinion because they actually carry it out in action, but they start doing certain things. Now, I bet you any amount of one of them officers, all 5 of them officers, none of them jump on that boy one-on-one.
Absolutely.
But when you get together with your boys, your chest get big then, and then you got to do this and do that. And that's one. Let me say this, Dozell, and I'll be quiet. That's one of the issues. Officers come on the job, do the right thing, but once they get around certain other officers and they start acting a certain way, and then it's the group of them act a certain way together. They don't do it one-on-one. I can name officers on this. We got a sergeant right here in Jacksonville that should be fired right now. They made all kind of racial tweets, and that coward won't jump on nobody out there on the east side by itself, or anywhere by itself. Yeah. He won't even chase somebody probably by himself. But when he got his boys with him, he the biggest thing. He the sharpest knife in the drawer then. So, yeah. And that's what happens across the country. I've seen that happen a lot of times. I know when I was out there on the street, I've been to chase somebody away from the pack. Next thing I know, I'm looking for everybody. I got to walk them back to the car. Ain't nobody even behind me because they scared to run behind, run by because they know we're going to get too far from everybody else. So you got a lot of cowards on the police department. I'm sure I'm telling you don't already know. There's a lot of cowards out there wearing that badge. You got some of them that come on for the right reason. Then once they get out there and they start, getting around certain officers, they get tainted with this. I won't say what they get tainted with this poison or something. And that's when they start acting different. And that's what you saw with those 5 guys. I guarantee some of those guys, all of them Q dogs, 4 out of the 5 of them were Q dogs. So they got some kind of moral character. And for them to go out there and do what they did, I mean, that's one of the worst beatings I've seen. Like I said, they're like a gang initiation. So what were you saying, Dozell? I'll shut up. What were you saying?
Well, we got 2 minutes before the producers are here saying we got to get out of here. But let me just say this. And this is my baby brother. I ain't gonna never come against him, and especially in a public forum. But we obviously have different outlooks on some things. I never.
And that's fine.
Yeah. When I got the police bug, or when it got injected in my system, not once, and this is no reflection on my brother at all, who had a stellar career, but not once did I ever want to be a Jacksonville cop, because their reputation was, and it wasn't an unfounded reputation. I saw them, how they handled people. And my daddy, being the oldest, well prepared me on how to act when I'm stopped. And I'd be doggone if he wasn't absolutely right. If I hadn't have been yes sir and all of that, only God knows what would have happened. But that, to say that is, so I worked in another department in the state of Florida, and they were so concerned about tourist dollars that if you stepped out of line, buddy, you were on your own. They didn't put you out. They didn't give you the gun and a badge and a nightstick and Mason tell you to go out there and be suicidal. But they let you know that you were not going to mess up their tourist dollars. And so I kind of walked away with, I was proud of that. I like that. And I like the fact that nobody ever, I'm 6'3", and nobody ever said Dozell Varner bullied them. I'm glad they've gotten away with that. But when I go, and my brother and his partner they're down here training in South Florida, now a police agency. They do an excellent training. Any police agency would want their work. But I find myself, this is funny, you talked about, Kim, how the tides are turning, how policemen beat up on people, now the community is beating up on police. So now I'm kind of like smack dab in the middle. I'm a policeman at heart, but I'm a pastor. So, and I'm a community leader. I sit there in their trainings, and I'll sit in a group, and I'll just sit back and not even take part in the discussion because I want to watch these guys. And man, this may sound funny, but when these guys talk about how they're treated and how they are misrepresented, and I almost like want to give them a hug because I feel sorry for them. But for all of these guys and girls who voice that, there's one clown or one pack of clowns like that 5 that make it bad for every brother or sister who puts on that badge.
Yeah, I agree. I can't do nothing but agree with that.
Yeah,
So,
more accountability, swift accountability is definitely something that's needed. That's not been happening. And so, we'll keep hope alive, but I think that um, we need to continue our due diligence with our local law enforcement and at the federal level, because again, this is going back to the 1930s, the 1940s, where you were seeing a man lynched, every day. This is incredible. I mean, it's to the point where some folks don't even want to go out anywhere because they're fearful, not of the corner thug, if you will, but
driving while
of the
black.
thugs on the police department. Are they going to get stopped? Will their child, who's 16, who can drive and go run an errand, is he going to get stopped? Is he going to come home a whole being? I mean, again, a man who has no legs and was out of his wheelchair running on the stubs of his amputated legs gets shot and killed by 3 officers. They said he had stabbed some other person, and that he had the butcher knife, but I think that could have been handled differently. It's open season on Black men, and it's just not safe. America's not a safe place.
Driving while black.
It,
Janis,
it, it, it's and Janice, I will say this, and I'm not trying to defend their actions, but anytime a person has a knife, but the fact this guy didn't have any legs plays a big role in what I'm about to say too. But anytime a person has a knife and you're 21 feet away from that person, you're justified in shooting him with 21 feet away. And that sounds crazy, but they can close the distance and cause more bodily harm than to you with that knife as quick as you can shoot them with that gun. Because the odds of you missing him, if you run in zigzag pattern or whatever, he can close the distance and kill you with that knife. Going back to what you said, this guy didn't have any legs. Obviously, he couldn't close the distance that quick. So the one thing else I want to add before we shut down tonight, I don't know what kind of reform is necessary. I've heard people say, you sue the officer instead of the department. When you start hitting the officer in the pockets, that'll make them want to do the right thing. Right now here in Jacksonville, it's been that way for years. If you do something stupid out there, the person can sue the officer. It's not just the department they can sue. They can sue the officer. Huh?
I didn't know that.
What's that? Yeah. You can go at the officer now. You can go at the officer now. They got this thing that our FOP and I think the governor is even trying to back it up and everything too. I forgot what it's the Police Reform Act or something.
Yeah.
I forgot what the title of it is.
They want to,
but you can actually when you get your attorney, you can actually sue the officer.
Wow.
The George Floyd Act is one thing, but I'm just saying we've had something in place here before that happened with George Floyd. And if you go after that officer, you just got to prove yourself in court that this officer. If you can prove that the officer acted away from his training and diverted from his training to do what he did to cause that issue, then yeah, you can go after him. But if he's in the rights of his training, you can sue him, and it's not gonna. That's how you were trained to do. So
that's very progressive of Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I did not know that they had a policy against qualified.
Let me answer. I see Mike got a question real quick. I'm gonna interrupt real quick. Mike has a question. He says, has that ever been enacted? You've had people that sue police officers before. I don't know if you remember, Dozell, or you remember, Mike. Frank Hampton Jr. was chasing a car. That's why we don't do car chases anymore. When he was chasing a car, and that guy ran a red light. And when he ran a red light, somebody came from the other direction and T-boned the car or something. T-boned one of the cars that was involved in the chase, one of the officers in the chase or something. And they sued Frank Hampton for that because he was chasing the individual. That's why that was a chase that stopped us from chasing vehicles here in Jacksonville. And Janis, for clarification, if a person runs from the police in a vehicle, we can't chase them unless it's a deadly felony or something like that. They just killed somebody, they just robbed somebody, or you think they're going to cause great bodily harm to somebody else if you don't stop them. So, a misdemeanor, we can't chase misdemeanor people. Driver's license charges, you chase somebody and they running because they got a bad license, we can't chase them. So that case with Frank Hampton is the one that started that. They actually sued Frank Hampton. I don't know if they got any money out of him or not, but they sued him. So
Well, I've
that's been
some,
and you know how long ago that was? That was years ago.
Right. I did not
So
know that.
that was years ago.
I have heard a number of officers of community activists talk about in different jurisdictions what you just illuminated, Kim, about suing the officer personally, which I've done, and also a type of insurance policy that officers would have to carry, so that the cities, because these cities are being hit millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. There was a report last year that came out, and it talked about the billions of dollars that local jurisdictions are putting out because of these lawsuits or settlements by citizens because of police brutality and wrongful arrest and the whole nine. But I think that there needs to be another discussion, and I'm not sure, because I have to look at the bill, if that was something that was in the George Floyd policing reform. But that's something that, again, the people in local jurisdictions should be saying, look, we want officers, when they go rogue, that they have to be held personally accountable if they aren't, like you said, following their training, if they've totally gone off the grid, and if they have a certain certain insurance policy that has to come against, because individual officers are not going to have the money to pay out.
Hate to cut this off in the middle, guys. I just got the producer. We got to get out of here. Listen, next week we're back at it. This turned into a dynamic discussion. KV came on. Jan, you are every week. You heard me outline what the shows are going to be like. I can't tell you what's going to be specific dates at this time, but I've outlined what shows. You are invited to join us every day, every Monday this month. And we know you're not relegated to just Black-oriented things, but we just know you got a great perspective on that. KV, so glad you joined us tonight. You'll be hearing from us by Thursday, Dozell, on what's on next Monday night show. Mac, you rock, dog. We sure appreciated you.
Thank you, Mac.
Your input. Join us next week. Dialogue with Dozell, Monday night. Looking for you. Thanks, Jam. Love you, cuz. KV, love you, man.
Love you, Jam. Yes, sir.
We'll see you next Monday night, too, y'all. We out. Dialogue with Dozell.
I didn't hear you. What was that?
We'll see you next Monday night. We'll see you next Monday night. Not hear you. We'll see you.
All right.
You heard him, Jam, right? Dialogue with Dozell. We out. God bless you.